Okay, we're recording. Now, this is Maury Miller. It's August 12th, 2014, and I'm interviewing Joann Huffington. And Joann, first of all, I'm going to just ask, where were you born and when?
Well, I was born south of Marshall, about probably 8 miles, on July 2nd, 1937. And I was born at my grandparents' home, which was Frank and Vivi Morgan.
So you're born in the home?
In my grandparents' home, yes.
Okay.
And a Dr. Highsmith brought me into the world.
Okay.
He was from West Union.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only
You're
child.
an only child. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about, have you always lived in Marshall or around Marshall?
Well, no, because Dale and I lived in Jasonville, Indiana for about 3 years. And we were there because of Dale's work. He had a factory there. And it's a small town, but we enjoyed it. That's the reason we left Marshall. And then when we came back, we built our house here in Marshall, 2 miles south of Marshall.
So you always lived in Marshall until you married, and then you and Dale moved away for a while. Okay. So you grew up here.
Right.
Went to Marshall schools.
Well, I grew up across from the Avon School, which is south on the Grand Turn Road, south of the Emmanuel Church. I lived right across the road from the Avon School. And I went there until I was in the 8th grade. And, of course, they had consolidated schools by then. So then I went to junior high, the 8th grade.
Okay, in Marshall.
In Marshall.
Okay, okay. To talk a little bit about growing up. Did you have playmates? What kinds of things did you like to do?
Well, I didn't have any brothers or sisters, of course, to play with, but I had a good friend, June Norton, who lived most of the time with her grandparents when it was the next house north of where I lived. And we'd ride bicycles together, and we did a lot of things together. And then I had a cousin, Marjorie White. That was her married name. She was Marjorie Walsh. And we were just a few months apart in age, and we used to play a lot together. But, of course, Marjorie's gone now, so, well, and there was the Thompson family, which lived just south of us. And there was a whole bunch of kids there. And
Well, talk about some of the playtimes. What kinds of things did you like to do?
well, I always had a playhouse. And we had an old log building in the back of our house. And sometimes that playhouse would be at the back of that. And, oh, I'd have pans out there, and I'd cook and make mud pies. And coffee cans used to come with tin. They were tin, and then they'd have a little lid about that big around, you know. And that's what I made my mud pies in. And they were always chocolate pies because the dirt, you know, was kind of brown, so I thought they were chocolate pies. And but then I never got into pie baking until I was in my 40s, so all that playtime pie making didn't work very fast with me, but I finally got there. And,
Well, then as you got to junior high and high school age, what were some of your favorite activities? What kinds of things did you like to do?
well, I was scared about going to junior high because I'd always gone to school in this one-room school, and sometimes we wouldn't have any more, or 6 or 8 pupils, you know. And if it hadn't been for the Thompson family, we might have not only had 4, but that was a big family, and they had several children in school at the time I was in school. And I don't know, in junior high, I don't know too much.
Boys.
Oh, no.
Well, you had school activities. What kind of school activities did you do?
Well, in high school, I was always in chorus, and I was in GAA for, I think, only 1 year. I'm not the athletic type, but my dad died when I was only 13, and that's when I went into 8th grade, of course, that fall. And that was kind of a traumatic experience.
Well, it was all a very dramatic time for you then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, but my mother was a good mother, and she kept us together. And of course my dad had been a farmer, and so my mother just continued on the farm, and mother had a cousin that lived with us, and so he continued. He wasn't married, and he didn't really have a home, so our home was his home, and he did the farming along with my granddad Morgan, and I don't know, I had a simple life, I guess you would say, but church was always a big part of my life. Went to the Snyder, it was the United Methodist Church, which is no longer there now, and I always was in MYF when I was in church, and I don't know, I just wasn't a real rowdy type.
Well, do you have some
girl.
special high school memories?
I had one real good friend, and her name was Rosanna Hogue, and she lived out in the Clarksville area, and we're still, well, we don't see each other very often, but we used to write letters back and forth, and but now, you know, as you get older, you sometimes lose those close friends. It's not that you're not friendly with each other, but you're just not as close as you used to be. And I don't know.
Did you have some particular responsibilities around the home? Was it your responsibility for cooking or for other things?
Well, I always liked to cook. Anything that my mom was doing, I was usually right there helping her. And my job used to be to dust. My mother didn't like to dust, and so she would clean the floors and do things like that, and then I would do the dusting.
Okay.
And then my mother took in ironings, washings and ironings, and I would help her iron. And so, like I say, I just had kind of a simple growing up, but it was a good one.
Did you have extended family around? Did you get together with them?
Well, yeah, my grandma and granddad, we didn't live very far apart, and Sunday dinners were a big thing. We'd usually go to their house for Sunday dinner. And I mentioned that cousin a while ago, and we did a lot of things together. And so, just simple things. More simple than what kids do today.
Okay. Did you have...
I was a member of 4-H, yeah,
Okay.
Triple T 4-H.
Okay.
And I was in that from...
Well, what did you do in 4-H?
Well, I had beef cattle, and I had dairy cattle. And I was in 4-H from 10 years old to when I graduated from high school. Then that was my last year.
Well, your animals would have taken some of your time. Did you have other hobbies, that things that you were particularly wanted to do to spend your time?
Well, not really. That was, I mean, I don't know. I didn't have anything that was outstanding that I did. I was just a kid.
Well, let's talk about you and Dale. How did you and Dale get together?
Well, through Dale's sister-in-law. She told him that she knew a Morgan girl and thought she was pretty nice and he ought to come to see me. So he called me one evening. It was in February, colder than all get out. And Dale was in school in Chicago at the time. And he said, well, could he come over? And I said, well, I'm not fixed. And because this cousin that I mentioned several times, she had helped her parents move, and she had a little boy. He was about a year old, and I had kept him while she helped her parents move. So, you know, I hadn't done any fixing up that day very much. So he said, well, that's fine. I'll be home in 2 weeks, and I'll come over.
So it gave you 2 weeks to get fixed.
Yeah, it gave me 2 weeks to get fixed. And so that was in, I reckon, the last of April. Yeah.
February.
Oh, February, I mean, last of February. And about the second week in April, I had a ring. So we didn't waste any time.
No, that was quick.
But we didn't get married until November of 1958. And we were married in the Snyder United Methodist Church. And went to housekeeping in a house that belonged to Dale's brother, Dean, and no electricity, no inside plumbing, and I wasn't used to inside plumbing or running water, but Dale had been, so we didn't stay there too long. Dale didn't like going out and sitting in that little house in the cold, and then we bought a little house at the edge of Marshall. That was our first home, and we paid $7,000, wasn't it? $7,000 for that house.
Well, did you get married right out of high school, or how?
No. I was 21 when I got married, and Dale was 25.
So you've had some jobs?
No, I didn't have any job.
Okay.
No, I was I just was at home until I got married.
Okay. Okay. So you and Dale lived in Marshall for a while, and then you moved to Jasonville?
No.
No.
No, we lived in that little house that we bought in Marshall. And then we moved down south, close to where Dale grew up. And then we bought this house over here where Dale Ann and Jim lives.
Okay.
And then from there we moved to Jasonville. And we was there for 3 years. And then we came back, and this house was being built while we lived in Jasonville. And
Well, what made you decide to come to Marshall?
well, Dale's work.
Okay.
He was working in Casey. And Dale Ann was ready to start kindergarten. And somebody told me, said, of course he wants to come back to Marshall because he wants his daughter to go to school in Marshall. Well, that had never been mentioned, but I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he was thinking that, but he hadn't said it out loud.
Well, we'll find out in a little bit. Okay, we'll find out about that. As you, perhaps growing up or in your adulthood, have there been particular people that have been significant influences in your life?
Well, of course, my grandma Morgan, and my mother, and there's been lots of people that I didn't think about it at the time that I know has influenced my life.
Well, as you think back on this whole history of your life now, there's been lots and lots of things that have happened nationally, internationally, happened in Clark County. What major events do you think, those were really things that I remember? You don't have to think big, you can think local.
Well, I can remember the day that Kennedy was killed.
Okay.
I thought, was hearing it on the radio, and I thought, well, that's a tragic thing. And I don't know what else.
Let's talk about some things more local than that. Let's talk about your household. Obviously, during your lifetime, there's been lots and lots of inventions, lots of different things have changed in the way your house looks and the items you have in your house. What kinds of things have been most memorable to you?
Well, probably I used to think when I was a little girl, I thought, oh my goodness, if somebody had a dishwasher, that was something, really out of the ordinary. Well, I've had a dishwasher practically ever since I've been married, and it is a big help, but it's not such a big, phenomenal thing as I thought about as a child. And I don't know, of course, washers and dryers. My mother used a wringer-type washer. I had one of those when we were first married, but then I got an automatic, and it's a great invention.
Well, let me ask you, if somebody were not from here, if somebody were to ask about Marshall and you were doing a kind of a build-up on Marshall and say why this is a place they should know about, what kind of things about Marshall would you say?
Well, it's a clean town, and I think it's probably I'd say a close-knit town. I think people care about each other, and I think if you have a problem or something, I think people are willing to, I think they're helpful.
Okay.
And it's not so large, and just more a hometown feel.
Well, I appreciate your talking with me, Joann. And with this, like I said, this will be kept on record at the library and available to folks